The Nullificators. Prototype Grey Knights. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the factions, forces, and units of the Warhammer 30k universe and the Horus Heresy, where the age of knowledge and enlightenment has ended, and the age of darkness has begun. And today, we shall be discussing one of the least known units of the Great Crusade, a formation that was clearly the prototype of the Grey Knights, and that which would have been used as an example to the Emperor from Malcador himself. For surely, if the Emperor was to grant Malcador the resources he received, there must have been a damn good reason for it. And in this unit, these warriors, we see all the proof that Malcador would have needed to persuade his oldest and dearest friend, the Emperor of Mankind, of the need for the Knights of Saturn's moon, the Grey Knights. Today, we shall discuss the barely remembered units that first fought against the neverborn, the Unclean, the demons. For today, we shall discuss the Nullificators. And so, as usual, let us hear a wee tale to get the right perspective. From the Bald Library. Recommissioned. My have been, then was not, then was again, then not. My personal rhyme. It takes out some of the sting, despite how bitterly I may state it some days. My own little mantra. But then, what was I? Then not. I was a librarian of the Great Crusade, the 2,752nd Expeditionary Fleet. I am of the blood, a son of Sanguinius. When I fought my way through 1,000 competitors, bested them all, beat them all, only then could I stand before the blood and look them in the eye. Small, lumpen and debased was I, a survivor of the Rad Wastes. Like all of my kind, we were only barely human in our visage, scarred from head to toe, malnourished and meagre in frame. Yet, I was wiry, fast, and my sinews were strong. My will, stronger. I was given over to the sarcophagus, filled with the blood of our Lord the Angel, and I transformed while inside that tomb. Not just of the body, but in every regard, every possible way. When I awoke, I remembered nothing of my time inside. I did not remember the howling and screaming, the times I thought my mind would snap under the weight of the eternal darkness, with only my breath and heartbeat to remind me I still lived. The excruciating pain that came when my bones snapped and reformed, elongated and strengthened. But when the cords of my muscles snapped again and again, pulled taut over a frame too mighty for them. Of course, the muscles knitted back again and again, each time healing stronger than before. When I awoke, when I was released from the sarcophagus, I was unrecognizable. Tall, I towered over many of my brothers, even of the blood. I was multiple heads taller than I had been when I was interred. Godlike, my flesh was like marble, my hair lustrous and golden, and my countenance that of an angel. But this was by no means the most dramatic of changes, even so. For something had been gifted to me by the blood that was rare even amongst the Astartes. The power of Sanguinius coursed through my veins, but it also elevated my very soul. I was now able to touch the beyond, able to witness the other realms, able to hear the minds of others. I was bequeathed power the like I could never have dreamed even existed. And this was not hidden or chided, nor reviled or repudiated. Then it was seen as a gift, took the oaths, and worked ever as hard in my training amongst the blood as I had upon the irradiated sands of Baal. I earned my second skin, the black carapace. I worked for the right to carry the Volkite, then, as the crusade went forward, to wield the bolter. I must admit, I found the bolter the lesser of the two weapons at first. Yet it was swifter to fix and clean, the ammunition in more ready supply, and it was sturdier. For the rare occasions when the enemy weathered the storm of our ire and managed to get in close. Of course, this did not save them, any of them. For we were Astartes of the legions of the Emperor, and none could withstand our wrath. Eventually, I joined the Librarians and was trained in the use of my abilities, to hone them, enhance them, make them work for the men around me, my brothers ever glad to have me amongst their number in any campaign. Yet, back then, we were so ignorant, so naive. We did not know what this all meant, not then. We were like children playing with Prometheum, is what I was told later. The 1,000 sons who were allies of ours, along with the sons of the Khan, the White Scars, they worked with us to form the orders and disciplines which we could use safely. We were not to know what was to come. And eventually, the fear of the witch, the unspoken terror of the wizard, reared its head. For the 1,000 sons and their Primarch, Magnus, they were not careful, they were not cautious, and they were not quiet in their estimation of their abilities over others. And eventually, for my part, I felt it was all driven by jealousy, that those Primarchs and legions without the gift were smarting, and thus they took out their vengeance upon the rest of us. The road was straight, their logic simple. How many enemies had they witnessed using the powers of the warp to enslave and annihilate? That all done with this power was corrupt and would besmirch the soul of any who wielded it. The use of the weapons of the enemy were not viewed as clever nor cunning, nor even wise. They were seen as a blemish, and the resentment grew until finally some of the sons went to the Father, and then all were gathered together. For the Emperor summoned all of the Primarchs to the Council of Nikaea. And to the surprise of all, the Khan did not attend. The angel was outspoken. The Red King, Magnus, was derided and accused. The final upshot of the council was simple, stark, and definitive. The Librarians would be disbanded and disbarred. All who had the gift were told to restrain themselves, to cut themselves off from this part of their being. No psychic powers were to be used ever again. We of the Blood Angels did not argue. We did not rebel nor even grumble. If the Emperor proclaimed this the wisest course, and he was supported by our own father, the Angel, then who was I to resist their wisdom? And so, we were separated and our order broken. Our weapons would now be only the blade and bolter. Never again was I to touch the other world. Never again was I to use the power that I had inherited from the Angel, who had inherited it from his own father, the Emperor. I cannot lie. Many of us had difficulties with this. But we did it. Though it felt a burning hole in our souls, though it was akin to tearing out our own eyes or filling in our own ears, we did as we were bid. And we returned to the battle companies and chapters as line marines. An honor beyond belief, of course. Our greatest calling, our only use. To make war on the enemies of the Imperium and to die in the service of humanity. It should have been enough. For me, it was. I missed my old ways, my old life, but I did not mourn it. not at first. I did not understand, but I did not have to understand. The Father had proclaimed this, the Emperor himself had given the word. Who was I to defy the perfection that was my Lord's? So I was, then I was not, a librarian. The chaplains were born, and every month I met with mine. A rank created purely to make certain that no psychic powers were ever used. My watchdog was called Misaro. He was curt, treated me like a criminal in remission, not a brother, if I can be honest. The lectures were endless, the meetings tedious, but I adhered to the law. Eventually, I rose through the ranks of the blood, still never once touching the power, never using those gifts given to me by the blood of the angel. I was always one thing above everything else. I was Astartes. I was a space marine. Thus, I rose to the rungs of command, past sergeant, onto opte. But in all of this time, I still worried, as many of us did. The Emperor had sent the Wolf Lord Russ to destroy the Thousand Suns, and when they did this, many of us of the Librarians, well, we thought they might clean out all of us. Well, we feared it. Yet we believed in our Primarch. If nobody else would, Sanguinius would stand for us, surely. And then, within the time of only a few months, it all changed again. I was not in the force sent to Cygnus Prime, but I, like all of us, could feel the change from that campaign onwards. For the Primarch had been bested by a being that none could state was a Xeno alone. Denizens of the warp, we assumed that they were like any other alien. It was merely that they were from this other dimension, no different to hunting any predator, animal or foe. They would die beneath the boots of the Crusade. We, the legions, would terminate them whenever they made it across into this realm. On Cygnus, the only thing that could stop them, the only thing that could rouse our Lord and get him back into the fight, it was the old Librarians. Some of my old colleagues had, in their desperation, thrown away their shackles and used their illegal powers to rouse our master, Sanguinius. And he rose up and smashed the enemy. A dam had broken, and from that point onwards, I watched as we saw the return of the Librarians. It was our warp powers that best beat the darkness. It was our abilities that could thwart even the most aggressive and powerful of the foulness from the Immaterium. Then, the darkest truth came and hit us like a lightning bolt. The War Master, he had turned on the Emperor. He had betrayed us all, and he was not alone. The turncoats had conspired amongst themselves, created the perfect trap. And on Istavan, they slaughtered 3 whole legions. And not just Marines. Ferrus Manus, one of the most trusted and able of all of the Primarchs, was slain. The Raven Lord missing. The Primarch of the Salamanders gone, presumed dead. Horus Lupercal had taken fully half of the legions over to his side. None could fathom why. No matter their propaganda, their lies, their defamations of the Emperor, this was not the truth. It couldn't be. But as we fought them, that would out, as the truth always does. The traitor Primarchs and their entire legions had been dominated and changed by these Xenos of the Immaterium. They had fallen to evil. Like fairy tales and fables, the beings that were behind the heresy were so potent that they had taken over even Primarchs. And they were twisted, horrifying things that were only identified via ancient tracts, superstition and myth. We fought against evil made manifest, nightmares incarnate. We did our best, We fought with every ounce of our very souls, yet these beings were not like normal Xenos. They could not be broken, could not be shattered. Our usual tactics of decapitation strikes and morale-breaking charges, they did nothing to them. We slew them, but they never turned tail and ran. They never needed a leader, not really. They were not confused nor broken. They just came at us again and again and again. And all librarians eventually realized something terrible, for most of us would eventually face the same beings again and again. When we destroyed their bodies, they simply disappeared. And we found out that we did not obliterate their sentience. Their souls would drift into the other realm, ready to come back at us again and again. It did not seem possible, but the ancient wisdoms were right. These were demons, beings of malevolence that haunted the very dreams of humanity. They were real. As things progressed, as we went into battle after battle, doing the previously unthinkable, to fight against other Marines, to slay other Astartes. Well, these beings came amongst them so often. They would hurl them at us to soften our lines, expend our shot, erode our strength. It was so often that only after smashing hordes of these beings did the enemy legions then move against us. We librarians were adept at destroying them, but we were still so very few. Eventually, command spoke to those in other legions, and a new formation was to be created. The Nullificators. They were to be drawn from the best of the best, to be given weaponry rare and potent, and they would be tasked with becoming experts in the destruction of these Xenos from the Immaterium. And I was asked to lead them. I had already become an Opte, so I had the skills of command, they said. The warriors I was given were not all librarians, so I would be at the center of their line. I would be their leader. I would be the one to dispose and direct them, and the one to shield them when I could. And we began with tactical dreadnought armor, Terminator warplate. The best we had at the time. The Cataphractii armor was the bedrock of our power. But even this was not safe from the claws and teeth of these enemies. So we developed and changed, always trying to find the technological answer to a matter that turned out to be purely spiritual. We used thunderhammers and power fists, but they were not as potent against these vermin as they were against any other adversary. Despite my men being veterans of many campaigns, talented and able, they still died in their droves. If the old ways told of their existence, then surely some of the old ways might hold the key to their defeat. So, we librarians and nullificators hunted through dusty tomes, drew information from any source we could. Eventually, we were told to daub our armor with runes and glyphs from ancient days and dead cultures. Ignorant religious superstition became our trade. Ever trying anything to protect ourselves and enhance our ability to destroy them. I lost so many of my men, as there was no way to check anything outside of straight combat. And this was so very, very costly. Each glyph and ward crumpled before the enemy. Every scroll was useless until proven. So few of the writings of the arcane or esoteric were anything more than pure fantasy. But there were some. Our tech priests and tech marines came up with new weaponry, at least to us, the most prescribed of the old. We developed Volkite weapons that were to be used in melee, the burning power at least semi-effective against the enemy. Better than nothing. Certainly better than our previous equipment. And by painful trial and error, we formed the hexagrammic wards. The runes that would eventually protect against the worst of their powers of the enemy. They were not perfect, would not shield from all, but did at least protect against the lesser, smaller warp Xenos. what we all now accepted were actually demons. Our armories gave up their goods, and toxiferin flamers were also released to us. Even the most prescribed of all weapons were ours to use. Disintegrators. They too worked on the enemy. Not as well as they worked on those born in real space, but still, they worked. Through all of this, I was not really Librarian. I was the Primus Nullificator, the consul in charge of a wing of the Nullificators. Hence, as a Librarian, I have been, then was not, then was again, then not. Even with all of our powers, armor, weapons and training, experience and ire, we lost so many in each and every battle with them, yet we endured, and now we slay them in their very heaps. But that is all the past. I prepare my men. We're heading through the ruin storm. The Emperor lives. We go to meet him. We go to return to Holy Terror, to defend the Emperor from his sons and theirs, and that which they bring with them, all of the horrors of the pit. I can only hope that my Nullificators will give a good account of themselves, and of course, that I do too, as we go to break the siege of Holy Terror. The Grey Knights are the Imperium's premier force against the evils of chaos, but they did not spring out of nowhere. Malcador the Sigillite, later the hero, was the mastermind behind them, but from my perspective, he may not have come up with this idea in a vacuum. The Horus Heresy was indeed the Age of Darkness, the worst humanity had experienced since Old Night, and with it, Horus brought the full force of chaos in his wake. The Loyalists, though, were not idiots. There was mass denial at first, of course, predominantly due to the Imperial truth. This was the hard belief that there was no heaven or hell, there were no gods or spirits, nor demons or monsters waiting in the dark. The only enemy of humanity were aliens, ignorance, and weakness. Faith was the enemy. For the Emperor knew that the faith of humanity fed the dark gods of chaos. Yet he chose not to tell his sons of the existence of this ancient and most dangerous of all evils. Many will deride this decision, but we shall get into that in another video, as it would clearly derail this short entry about this unit. Yet, despite the tenets of the Imperial truth, eventually, even the Loyalist Primarchs and their armies of Marines were forced to concede that no matter the origin or reality of the enemy they faced, they appeared as demons and terrors of ancient days, and they were deadly. So the Loyalists and even some of the traitor forces attempted to create units that were specifically designed, trained and equipped to fight demons. Now the tale I've constructed did cover the meat of the situation, but to reiterate without the flowery language, the Nullificators were about as tooled up as one can imagine. Cataphractii armor was slow, but also the most protection one could gain outside of a dreadnought sarcophagus. The Loyalists also sanctioned research done into everything they could about the esoteric, and eventually, through excruciating trial and error, they finally found wards and glyphs that were actually effective against some of the powers of chaos. Many Nullificators died working out what did and did not work. Each ward was earned in blood. And these sigils and glyphs, these wards, were originally daubed onto the armor, but eventually the Imperial armies ratified and codified these sigils and called them hexagrammic wards. And they were eventually forged into the very fibers of the armor they wore, each drawn with rare and potent alloys and minerals found to contain mystic might. Due to the rarity of the equipment and the need for skill, only the elites of the veterans or the librarians could join the Nullificators. They used thunderhammers, power fists and other weapons when nothing else was available, but moved to their bespoke weapons later, the Ether Shock Maws. Like a power weapon, but with a Volkite element, meaning when struck, a wave of burning energy was released, one potent enough to burn through even multiple demons when it did connect. The Toxiferan Flamers were ludicrously rare and powerful, often only used by specialist legions who had a surfeit of destroyer units. You know who I speak of. But these Flamers did not just fire promethium. No. Amongst the gouts of flame were highly volatile chemicals and poisons, and even elements of psi-reactive matter that burned through demons like glue dropped on polystyrene. And the Nullificators were even permitted to wield disintegrators. Rare and potent, they were mostly off-limits. Now personally, I believe that this was due to the fact that they were some of the few weapons that would truly harm a Primarch. But that is beside the point. Although I cannot find a direct statement from Malcador in relation to the Nullificators, surely it must have been the efficacy of these units that was a proof of concept that led to the creation of the Grey Knights. The Knights, of course, are all potent psychers, as their gene seed is drawn directly from the Emperor himself, and their weapons are tailored to their power, making them factors above the results any Nullificator may have had on the enemy. But I cannot shake the realization that Malcador was merely taking what was already working, then ramping it up to the best it could possibly be. And, to my mind at any rate, this is how the Grey Knights were formed, as a first twinkle in the mind's eye of Malcador. Perhaps we shall never know for certain. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed this video, then do consider liking, then subscribing, and pressing the notification button, as I would not want you to miss out. And do check out the video description for links to more entertainment options. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.